Well, thanks to anyone who has viewed my videos. I'm back. I've had an interesting week. In fact, I've had a week where I've been a bit triggered, so I'll talk about that a bit later. So, for those of you that are new, I've had rape experience. I've been through stranger pack rape. I've had other rape experiences, about 11. I'm 78 years old, and it took me a long time to actually wake up and realise how I was living. So, further to my background, I did a lot of work with a rape crisis and with a system that we have here in New Zealand, quote unquote, counselling women to help them make claims. So it was when I started doing the claims, and I did 57, one of them was a man. And when I did the claims, I started to see patterns in our aftermath, what I call our aftermath. And the reason why I'm doing these videos is because there wasn't a lot of help for me, and I had to find things within myself. And I truly believe that we do all have the answers within ourselves. And I'm hoping that my voice and my experience will encourage that in others. So I got a call the other day from a dear friend who's had a relative that's been recently raped, and it is actually going to go through the court system. But she asked me about flashbacks. So here I want to provide some sort of practical examples of how I managed it. So this is what I said, and this is what I did. So flashbacks for me in the beginning, after the pack rape and the home invasion, it was like having a movie in my head constantly, day and night. And because this was 1981 and there wasn't a lot of people to talk to, I had a little boy, I had to get on with my life. But here I was living with this aftermath. So one of the things I did was kind of sit up at night and write everything down that was going on in my head. It wasn't like a story, it didn't have paragraphs or commas, I just kept writing it out. And also going for walks in nature, which was easy for me where I live. But I have a theory that it needed to come out of my system so it just wouldn't hang around in my head. And of course the past rapes that I'd had that weren't so obviously extreme, I learnt very early on how to just numb them and push the aftermath right down into myself, so that I actually believed it was my fault and I was the reason why these things had happened to me. So that's how I dealt with flashbacks. And I think if you've also, it's kind of getting out of yourself. You're needing someone to talk to about it that can receive it. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. So eventually, I found that the flashbacks passed. It took, after the home invasion and pack rapes, it took about 3 months, and I was on a walk one day when I had stopped, the movie stopped for about an hour, and I thought, I'm going to get better. It was like a gift. And those hours became larger. They became, half a day. They became days. So eventually they faded away. And faded away to a point where I'd have to be triggered. So one of the other things that I found during that time, there was a woman called Dr. Kubler-Ross who'd done a lot of work around dying. She worked in hospitals and found that we didn't really deal with... Oh, my dog's just got tangled up in the cord. In our Western way, didn't really deal with death very well. And she wrote a book on death and dying, and one of these kind of little lovely miracle stories was when she came to Wellington that year and I heard her speak. This was a few months after that terrible thing had happened. And I clung on to her understanding of death, and I actually wrote about it in my own work. And I called it the Healing Map, and she called it the 5 stages of death. And it gave me an understanding. I called it the Healing Map, and it helped me understand that there was a journey, a process. Looking for something. So the first stage with death is numbness, which is often what we do with rape experience. We numb it all down. And then she talked about the anger and the fear, kind of, why me, blah, blah, blah. And then she talked about integration, where the next stage was integration and acceptance. So I used that to say it's kind of getting to a point where you start to accept that you've been through these rape experiences and how they've affected your life, your personal life. And from that point, you begin to find ways to, I call it, integrate or accept, make the changes that you need to make in your life. And then the final stage for her, the 5th stage, was death. The 5th stage I've changed and called it coming home, which I call coming home to who you truly are. And you might have gathered I had to read a lot. I didn't find therapy that understood or counselling that understood. I mean, Rape Crisis did to some extent, but when I was a part of Rape Crisis, that really opened my world up to finding a lot of women that had experienced sexual abuse or rape as children, and I began to listen. So that's another part of my knowing, is that I've listened to hundreds and hundreds of women's stories, mainly women. And that's how I began to actually learn from these women. How did children survive? What did they find that worked for them? How was it for them? What was the aftermath that they were suffering? And I began to put from that listening and my own experience, I began to put this understanding together. As I say, it's an understanding. It might be different for other people. I'm not actually here to present a doctrine. It's not like this is the only way. It's just observation and how I've grown through it and how I've watched other women and listened to other women. So, yeah, this week, and I'm not usually triggered. I mean, I have a pretty contented life these days. The last 20 years has been growing that contentment and growing into myself. Oh, before I go on to the next thing, I found a woman Susan Bryson, well, I didn't find her, but I found her book. It's called Remaking Myself, The Aftermath After Rape. And she is a professor in Princeton University, philosophy, and went on holiday in France and got stranger raped and left for dead in a ditch. But she began to come out of it and create essays and speaks and writing. And I found her book, even just the title, The Remaking of Self. I thought the title was wonderful. And I might find some lovely bits to read in her book to you. But remaking of self. So in the last 20 years, I've been kind of remaking myself, but also linking up with this, who I was as a little child, the essence in me, as I've talked about. We all have our own special essence, and I have my special essence, and I've been finding it more and more, which has been wonderful. But I have had my days of triggering, and this week I got triggered. And maybe some of you have. The Epstein files. I just recently joined Instagram, and there were some people posting. So when I get people posting things about the Epstein files, for example, and I find children who've been involved in these rape situations, and it really touches my heart because I'm a human being. And it touches me emotionally. But what I've learned is I cannot just keep hearing it. I have to find an antidote. So I'm not watching them at the moment. I'm not in denial. And my antidote is to get on walks with my dog, go into my garden. So my garden's looking really lovely this week. I've put a lot of energy into my garden, and it takes me a little while to actually restore myself when I'm triggered like that, because a couple of other things happened too. There was incidents of sexism I found in Aikido, undermining of women, and then I also had an incident on the street where I saw this woman being arrested. And I went up to the police officer and said, "Can I help?" And he didn't speak to me. And then the woman was handcuffed and said, "I've been raped." Oh, my goodness. And he said, "No, she hasn't." And I just looked at him and said, "How do you know that?" And then 2 other police appeared, and they said, "If you don't move on, we'll arrest you." And I felt really threatened. And I got in my car, and I was heading to Aikido practice, and I cried. And so I had these triggerings this week, and I wasn't feeling great, and feeling quite touchy, annoyed, a little bit of powerlessness. So the 2 things I had to write down. I sat down and wrote. And it wasn't like a paragraph or an essay. I just wrote the things that had happened. And I can still see the woman's face when she said to me, "I've been raped." And I thought, why has this happened to me? And I thought, yeah, I've been triggered. And I thought, my antidote is to get on and do a video about this. So that's what I'm doing. And my antidote is finding my pathway through life so I can be whole. I'm not in denial. I know what happens to women and children. I've known for many, many years, over 40 years, I've been hearing stories and believing them. And I've seen women close to me have been labelled with paranoid schizophrenia because the mental services did not stop and ask her what happened. And I know for a fact, I worked in mental health. She used to come and talk to me, and I said to her the first time, I said, "You have no more schizophrenia than my big toe." And so this is why I'm here. I'm here because, one, as I said, we need a voice in this. We need a voice. Our experience is real and important. And one of the things I've noticed in the addiction field, you can be a recovering addict and be quite open about that and be part of the counselling system and the recovery system. I found it very hard being a counsellor in the system that was created here for women. I got undermined by other women, because somehow there's not a value in our experience. But there is a value, and this is the antidote. We know, like when I said to my friend who rang, who wasn't the one that's been raped, and I gave her the suggestions about what I had done for flashbacks, and she got back to me and she said, oh, that was so helpful. It's so helpful for her, she said, to know someone who's been there. We have a value. And this is why I'm doing these videos. And like I said before, it's affected our life force. So we need to find the ways, and I get you all have them, the ways that feed your life force. Oh, the other thing happened that triggered me. I thought, oh, go online. And I love watching women who are doing different things. And this young woman was living on a bit of land. And she'd left academia and she was making a life for herself on a bit of land in Poland. And she'd put a tent up and she was living there with her big dog. And she kept getting stalked by males. I thought, oh my God. I went on because I thought it was going to be like a really empowering story. And there was this woman, beautiful young woman, being stalked by men to the point that she left that place. But she hasn't been given up. She hasn't given up. The next thing I found was her in a van touring Monaco, Africa, with her dog. And it was a much more positive video. And I thought, oh my God, I've had a week of triggering, a week of what women live with. So we're amazing. Yeah, and I have to take my hat off. I mean, in 1981, my family didn't acknowledge what I went through with the stranger pack rapes. No one acknowledged it. I was on my own. I went through the family court and had to be psychiatrically assessed to see whether I was fit enough to raise my children. Now, look, I'm not saying I did have reactions. When I get triggered, and I watched myself this week, I get really feisty, I get snappy, I get annoying, and, my kids had to grow up with my moods. I did, going through the family court, oh God. In the 80s, it was horrendous. And having the threats of my children being taken off me. Not because I was a bad mother. I was a suffering woman. I mean, I had been through something so big, you'd think they'd acknowledge it. It wasn't like, raped by my boyfriend or, my husband or something. I had been something, you'd think society would have acknowledged it. Oh, no. If I look, and I've got all the family court files, if I read back, none of them ever mentioned that. And I was quite feisty and quite open with it. So one of the things I learnt this week too is one of the reasons why I have survived is I got really feisty, I got really annoying, and I got very verbal. And I would tell men where to go sometimes. I was stroppy. But that's what saved me. I mean, that's why I took up the martial art. And yeah, I spent years in the martial art being undermined by male teachers. Oh my God. Men I trained with that tried to hurt me because I didn't think women should be in the martial arts. But, that was just fuel to my fire. That was kind of, well, F you lot, you're only men, I'll tell you a secret, which is so funny. In the martial arts, and I'll tell you what, you look for it anywhere. In the martial arts, you know how men are vulnerable. They've got testicles. They never, ever punch there. They never, ever kick there. They avoid them and they pretend that they don't exist. It's quite funny. They still do it. It's quite funny. And even occasionally I've mentioned it. And they go, oh. In one sense they said to me, oh, you kick a woman there, it would hurt. And I looked at him and I said, it wouldn't make me sick. Yeah, it wouldn't make me collapse to the floor. I mean, I guess I've always had a rather I got a humour, yeah, and that was another way I could cope. I got quite humorous. I mean, it's quite pathetic, really. You can kick to the knee, you can kick to or you can punch them in the soft spots in the side, and the solar plexus, and the neck, and the eyes. But it's not until you do self-defense classes with a woman they'll say, kick them in the nuts. So I mean, oh my goodness. Anyway, so yeah, I'm here to promote that it's not always easy, and I often feel alone. It hit me this week when I saw that woman's face who said, I've been raped, and then the copper said, no, she hasn't. And I said, how do you know? I mean, I knew that woman had been abused and raped. It was written all over her. And this poor woman, I mean, she was dishevelled. She had a dressing gown on, and they were handcuffing her because she was being violent. And I didn't see any violence from her at all. I mean, she was distressed. She was not as angry as I could be, but she was a bit angry. I just saw her face. She was desperate. And here we go again with, nobody said what happened. I did put in a police complaint, and they got back to me and said, oh yes, she's well known to us. We've had many alerts, they called it. And I thought, yeah, she's a struggling woman, and I'd eat all my hats if she didn't have a history. And the copper said, oh, we don't know her history. No, they're not bothered with her history. And women, women, for all the things that have happened to us, please honour us. We don't shoot men. We don't beat men up. We don't, We've had a couple of women in New Zealand who killed their husbands after years of abuse and got taken to court. 2, I think. I know 1, maybe not 2, I don't know. 1 for sure. She buried him in the garden. I mean, no, it's not good. It's not good, but I mean, she'd suffered years and years and years, and she killed him and buried him in the garden. I mean, how rare is that? I think there's one woman who's been in America who's been murdered for her behaviour, her murdering. I think she went around murdering men. A prostitute. But we've got a good track record. So it's time, really trust yourself. If I had an older woman that said to me, Brenda, I recognise what you've been through. You're doing really well. Trust yourself. You've got something in you that's alive, that's passionate. You're really clear. Just trust yourself. And, a little bit of support goes a really long way, a real honest support. And if you find, as I say, a therapist or whoever, priest, it doesn't really matter. It's this human connection. It makes a world of difference, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for human connection so we can grow and become strong and grow our own remaking of ourselves. That's right. I'm different. I'm not the little wee shy, ground down woman that I was, from about the age of 15. Quiet, didn't say much, just did what was expected of me, worked really hard, put up with the shit. Oh, it's my fault that it happened to me. I'm not that woman anymore. I grew up. I changed. I found the passion and the fire in me. Yes, it sometimes came out rather bluntly and rather angrily, but I didn't kill anyone. I didn't beat anyone to a pulp. Yes, I was awful, and I was awful. My anger got the better of me sometimes, but I'd go out in the garden and I'd go out chopping wood. I'd chop wood, and that was one of the things that I just I'd kind of get it out of my system. And I'll talk a wee bit more about anger, because that's, I think, a very important part of our journey, and a very important part not to suppress, because it'll make you sick, personally, I think. So this is my video for today. I will keep doing it. I've got my little book here where I'm making notes, because I don't always want to repeat myself. And I'd love to hear what you have in yourself. So maybe this can become a little hub for us, so that we can learn from each other. You know, because you are valuable, and the aftermath isn't a mental illness, and what happened to you is real, and you have a very real response. You're a human being, and you know, I wish you all the peace and all that deepening understanding, and if I can support that in any way, that makes me happy. Well, apart from my gardening and my dog and my life. And I'm glad I've shared this with you today, because I feel it can go out there. Yes, I was triggered. And in a way, thank goodness, I'm a human being and a sensitive woman. See you next time. Thanks for listening.